TimCast IRL was a wild one tonight, and I find myself more torn than ever on this topic. This topic between Steven Crowder and the Daily Wire. I truly do not know where I stand on this one. It's so tough because, as I've said, I'm not a big fan of either. I respect both parties. I've never watched Crowder. I've never found him to be entertaining, but the man clearly is a big deal. 166,000 people were watching TimCast IRL tonight, one of the biggest episodes I've seen. And then with the Daily Wire, I really liked a lot of what the Daily Wire was doing, but in the past year with their anti-Trump nonsense and a lot of their positions has been a big turnoff to me. I greatly appreciate what they're doing. We've done some work with the Daily Wire in the past, and they've been great with us. But I really hate the anti-Trump stuff. It really pisses me off. So I don't have a dog in the fight. And the more I look into this, the more I'm continuing to be torn. Although I lean towards Daily Wire on this because Steven Crowder and the approach and how this whole thing is played out seems disingenuous to me. But I don't feel that strongly about it yet. But I'm leaning towards Daily Wire slightly. Now, there's a lot going on with this entire situation. Mark Dice had his super chats completely ignored, and then I guess Tim Pool acknowledged it towards the end, but then he says YouTube deletes them. That's not true, at least from my perspective. Now, Tim Pool gets a hell of a lot more super chats than I'll ever get probably, but if you go to the back end, it logs every single super chat from every live stream that you've ever done. So I don't really understand that argument. It deletes them live, like on the live feed publicly after a certain amount of time, depending on how long the super chat is. But you can go to the back end and get that. But at the same time, I mean, little bitty geeks and gamers, we have people that keep up with the super chats for us during the show. So you would think Tim Pool could do something like that. But I guess people's money just isn't that important to them, and they don't read every super chat anyway. But yeah, Mark Dice, his were completely ignored, along with so many others, and that's fine. Tim hardly ever reads more than maybe 5% of his super chats anyway. But there were some dingers in there that I really wish he could have read, specifically Mark Dice's. Now, there was a lot of softballs being thrown by Tim Pool to Steven Crowder. I'll give Luke credit because Luke actually asked a tough question about Not Gay Jared, a former employee of Louder with Crowder, who a lot of people have brought up. And again, as someone that's never really watched Steven Crowder, that name, Not Gay Jared, has come up a lot. And apparently he was once an employee. He voluntarily quit, from what I understand. And he gave a notice and everything, but he's been under NDA. Again, there's nothing really wrong with that scenario. A lot of companies do NDAs, and I think that they're necessary in certain situations. But Steven Crowder's doing the holier than thou. Oh, the power in the individual, company, big people shouldn't be holding small people down. And you're like, well, you have former employees that are under NDA. So it's just the whole thing just seems weird. So when Luke asked him, he dodged it, completely dodged it. But then Luke followed up, to his credit. And still, Steven danced around it a little bit. There's a lot of reaction over on Twitter. You got Viva, which I know Barnes, and obviously I know Viva and Barnes. I know Barnes better than Viva. Barnes is 100% on Crowder's side. Viva seems to be on Daily Wire's side, which is interesting. And here's Viva says, and here you have it, Team Crowder literally arguing the same exact thing that Daily Wire was arguing. They want to stay on YouTube. It's the biggest platform. It's the biggest reach. Crowder just doesn't want to bear the risk. Confession through projection.
Right. We've talked about this. Like, you built your career on YouTube is the argument that people use. Right. Last 3 years unmonetized. It's like, yes, we're trying to speak the most truth to the greatest number of people possible. It's not, we can't just all have behind the paywall honest conversations. Right. Because then you don't affect people at the biggest possible, tech company out there. Yeah, it's not so do that. But don't go so far as to play by this additional set of rules that really restricts what you're able to say.
And punish the creators, yeah.
Right? We've talked about this.
But I can't... so it sounds to me like they agree in theory. They just didn't agree with the mandate of the rules within the contract. So negotiate it. Like, I don't understand why that negotiation can't happen. And it doesn't seem like it happened based on all the information we have, which is frustrating to me. Then we have, I do not think that Real Daily Wire was an acceptable initial offer, but to me, it's impossible to say Crowder came out looking good. It seems he wants to be imposing the same exact terms as he's projecting to.
Kristen Baker says, will Crowder's company pay his creators guaranteed big money regardless of the revenues they bring in while they let their freak flag fly?
Time out. I don't agree with the premise. Nobody said it was regardless of revenues you bring in. It just said it could not be tied to big tech monetization and being on these platforms.
But that is the money you bring in. That is part of the money that you bring in. It's for a lot of creators, that's the money. That's all the money they bring in. So if you bring in a YouTube creator that has, I don't know, 800,000-900,000 subscribers, and maybe they're prominent on Rumble a little bit, but the majority of that revenue, unless they have outside, memberships or something, then guess what? They get demonetized. They have no revenue. So it seems like a really ridiculous stance.
You're bringing in 5 subscribers versus 500,000. That's a much different thing.
Yeah.
And sponsors versus no sponsors. That's a much different thing. Nobody said that they couldn't make money, and nobody said Steven had to be given a guaranteed production contract no matter what money he brought in. Right. They were completely and conveniently leaving that off of the table and saying, this is a lot of money, and if you lose anything, that's not going to happen.
To a rev split with upside, right? Again, this is what happens in the entertainment industry. Every time, whether it's a band at a venue, right? You do a minimum guarantee, which is going to be lower, which mitigates your risk, or you get the gate. You do a rev split with upside. You see any upside there? Is there any portion there that says, by the way, if you actually do have the 300, which is well over 300,000 people who said we're going to be in Mug Club, if you actually do hit that, you get to share in this. Is there any upside there?
They offered only negatives.
It's 100% ownership. And by the way, they're the only ones who demanded 100% of merch revenue. That's not even standard. So 100% of merch, hey, you can do the math right now. You just saw the sponsors. You just saw the live numbers.
Yeah.
That's what sponsors know about. How much can you guess can be generated from a single sponsor with the kind of numbers, if you're doing 1.7, 1.9 million screens per show for 35 minutes.
What's the standard rate? It's like...
The point is it's...
So, yeah, I feel like this all could have been dealt with in a much different way. Right here, Cernovich retweeted by Jack Posobiec. And let me be clear, because Jack Posobiec, and I follow Jack Posobiec, I do not like Cernovich at all. But both of these guys who are jumping on the pro-Crowder the pro-Daily Wire anti-Crowder train, I just want to point out that both of these holier-than-thou guys, okay, these guys never wanted to talk about their good buddy Jack Murphy. Oh, yeah, they loved Jack Murphy. They loved them some Jack Murphy. And then post Jack Murphy being exposed, they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to mention it. They didn't want to talk about anything Jack Murphy. They never addressed it because they're cowards. So while I tend to agree with, some of their takes on this particular subject, I'm not carrying anybody's water here because I don't care about any of these clowns. I am here to give you my opinion. And I am very torn on this topic because, like I said, I appreciate and respect Steven Crowder. I respect Daily Wire. I may have disagreements with both parties. I don't want this to be as ugly as it is, but it clearly is at this point. I know the internet is very divided right now, although I feel that Steven Crowder has more of the internet on his side up to this point. And I want to believe, as the individual, I want to believe Steven Crowder is the one in the right. I want to believe that. I just don't up to this point. I just don't, because too many things are not lining up. But I would love to be wrong about that. But let's listen to this right here. So Cernovich tweets, Crowder said there was no counter offer, but his agent may have asked for more money. Right, because an agent isn't acting on your behalf. RIP to the simps who fell for this. The fact that he says anything about simps falling for something and he never talked about Jack Murphy, but whatever.
I'm on your side on this one. Everybody can know my bias. The reason that really bothered me is because I run a company. I know how much money we make. And there are people who assume that revenue equals money in your pocket profit. And it's like, no. If they're giving him $50 million, it sounds so wonderful.
They're assuming you're dumb. They're treating the audience like they're dumb again.
Well, no. A lot of people don't.
But here's the thing.
Understand this.
People don't understand because they're assuming that you won't go and do research. Look, $50 million basketball money versus $12 million. If let's say Marvel says, I don't know, the new Thor movie is $200 million. Is that Hemsworth's salary? It's that simple of an analogy.
Yeah.
But the issue here, and I'll let Gerald kind of talk about that more. The issue here is like, I think that these people at Daily Wire, they've said that they're very business savvy. They're running a business. So, are they very business savvy? Are they dumb and don't know that $12.5 million a year for an entire production house is what we're actually looking at? Or are they lying when they say it's basketball money and $50 million salary? I think Candace Owens at one point got up to like 140 or something on the. I don't
So
really.
you said you wanted $30
Right.
million a year or 140.
And the
million.
only reason people know that's not true, and you've seen the transcript, you ever see me once say, hey, it's about more money? There was never an offer sent after I said, look, it's a non-starter if you don't change these terms, and please tell me that you're not doing this with other people. There was never anything after that where it was, of course, the non-starter is, I can't do 5 live reads because we do commercials.
let me-
I just want to ask one specific question because a lot of people are bringing this up and they're accusing you guys of only exposing them after they turned down your counteroffer. Is that true, or can you add more information to that?
Yeah, I don't know why they're saying the timeline that he kind of gave was completely inaccurate.
Yeah, there was never any counter offer from us. What Steven said was basically, look, guys, these are the terms that we have a problem with.
Right.
And if this, I don't care what the contract says dollar wise. If these terms are in there, that's bad, and you need to start again. This
Right.
has to be pulled out.
So there was no counteroffer because I'm seeing a lot of you guys say
There was
you
the
guys-
agent. The agent, I think my agent, they sent this term sheet. The agent said, well, if you're talking about 100% ownership, by the way, in perpetuity forever, meaning, and it's a 6-year contract with no option to negotiate. They have an option to extend for 2 years. 6 years, locked in at that rate. And again, how do you penalize someone for money that they don't make? They're not going to lose money on you being demonetized. Now, I get that I'm a special situation, but they said this is demanded of everybody. The big con issue is something that I've been running up against, and everyone in this industry knows for many, many years. They just were arrogant enough to out themselves and to put it in writing and to say, we know how to run this business. We figured it out. You don't know what you're talking about. And of course, after that, another last straw was, then going and trying to take our social media director, and I only showed you that email because he's willing for me to show you. Like, we have our people poached all the time. When you have your ideas stolen and they put more money behind it, not just mine, when you build someone up and someone else comes in and says, hey, we'll offer you more money, they use them for 6 months and burn them out. I'm sure that's an accident. I'm sure the people at the top of Daily Wire didn't know when they reached out to someone who was not looking for a job, who loudly and proudly advertises himself as social media director for Loud with Crowder. But I could tell you that on that phone call, they said, we have an entire social media department, right? I said, I have one guy, Gary, and he's awesome. A few days later.
I do want to dedicate more
Did
time.
Gary join Daily Wire?
Well, let me.
No, they came in and tried to hire him.
It's like I said, man, every bone in my body wants to side with the individual in this situation. My gut feeling I just feel like Steven Crowder is trying to play dumber than he really is for optics. He's acting like he's not a smart businessman, and he damn sure is a smart businessman. You know who's not a good businessman? Me. You know why? I said it in Tim Pool's chat. I've made more independent creators than fucking Steven Crowder has. Look at all the people that have been part of Geeks and Gamers that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Do you know how much money I get from any of these creators? Nothing. I have no agreements, and I'm not going to. I've never been in that type of business where I'm going to build you up so I can have your money or put you under NDA or all this other shit. I would be rolling in the money if I had that business sense, but I don't. I've never had that. Steven Crowder has NDAs, he has agreements, he has contracts, which is fine. The dude's a big deal. But then he's going to say, I just don't know all this business stuff. Yes, you do. You clearly know this stuff. You were in a business contract negotiation with a major corporation, and now you're acting like you never wanted anything to do with that. None of this feels right from his perspective for me. And it drives me crazy because I want to side with the individual. My gut tells me that something doesn't seem right. This whole thing has been wild. It's been crazy. We're going to continue to follow it. Shout out to Mark Dice. Mark Dice is about the only real one out there, it seems like. He will just call it like it is, and he does not care. Tim just continuing to crush it. You got to give this man credit. His show is just must-see TV a lot of the time now. And, man, this whole thing is just dirty. I hate that this is happening, and I just don't know how to navigate it. But I wanted to talk about it because I was in the chat, and a lot of people were asking me my opinions. So there it is. Not a hard stance on anything, although I'm just slightly leaning negatively towards Steven Crowder in this situation right now, and I recognize that that's going to be a very unpopular opinion because the internet is widely on his side, it seems. I see a lot of Jack Murphy's friends that are anti-Steven Crowder suddenly, which makes me feel dirty to be on that side of that discussion. But I don't really care for these guys either. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I understand it's a divided topic, and I understand there's a lot of people that are on Crowder's side, and I respect where you're coming from. I absolutely do. My gut feeling is just slightly different than yours, but I truly respect where all of you are coming from. You guys have a great day. Thank you very much for checking out this video, and we will talk to you later.